Hi, my name is Pete with Wingman Studios, and we put out a video that was an introduction to a series of videos that we would be doing, talking about fallacies in music quality, audio quality, music production, recording, all of these types of things, looking at points, phrases that statements that people have made that might not be completely true or might actually not be true at all. And these types of phrases or statements that are made, I've noticed that the list that I had made, these were statements that actually either slowed me down in my music journey, or it allowed me to be stuck, or cost me money. And so today, our very first video in this regard, and it's not necessarily in the order in which we did the, each one of the points in the introductory video. But the first topic we're going to look at is this statement: you can mix with any type of speaker as a studio monitor. Now, the reason why we're starting here might seem self-evident. If you can't actually hear what's going on in your audio tracks or within your mix, you will never get to where you want to go as an engineer, especially when you're dealing with, trying to get the mix to sound just right. So our discussion in this video will begin with, as I promised before, what we're going to do is we're going to steel man the actual statement and maybe take a look at why people make this claim. So let's unpack why people would say this. And we will also hit on some popular practices that like to push monitoring DSP. And we're not going to go too deep into this because I believe we're going to do another video on this separately, but we'll discuss this more, and we will discuss a little bit about what my experience has been. So there are so many variables when recording and mixing. I think we can all agree to that. There are a lot of variables. Even if you're mixing in the box, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of options. There's what seems to be an unlimited amount of choices that can be made. Now, that doesn't always mean that every choice that you make is going to lead you to a great mix. It's not going to lead you to great audio. It's not going to lead you to high fidelity. So somewhere along the line, we got to get some processes. We have to get some understanding, maybe some education, and some, let's say, statements or truths that we can rely on that will help us to get to where we ultimately want to go. And it's imperative that you get your systems and processes tight, or you're going to be swimming in an ocean, being tossed to and fro, clinging to fallacy statements, hoping for stability or anchoring in your musical pursuits. Taking the plunge and purchasing a well-designed and manufactured studio monitor, hear me very clearly here, was the best purchase and greatest improvement. If I had to make a list of purchases that were the by order of importance, the studio monitor would have been top of the list. But it wasn't always that way. Early on, I bought into the fallacy that really you can mix with anything. So I suffered. I suffered for years. I suffered with Dunning-Kruger disease, which means that statement means that I was a person who didn't know what they didn't know. And when it came to audio monitors, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was focusing on other pieces of gear, many of which were subpar. And again, based on fallacies and beliefs, never getting to the ultimate finish line for myself. So what's interesting is that if you can't hear what's going on with your audio, even if it's plugins, even if it's outboard gear, you might be choosing pieces of equipment or making plugin decisions that really don't sound good, because not every plugin sounds the same in terms of its audio quality. And this works the same way with outboard gear. So again, why is this statement accepted? Why is the statement that, well, you can mix with anything? Well, people make this claim with the caveat that you need to know the speakers really well. And again, that might seem self-evident. Okay, so I need to really know and understand what these speakers are doing. Most people don't. And most people who are trying to get the best mix possible, they don't know what's happening underneath the hood or within the actual design of the speaker, let alone all the other equipment. Remember, I said there's lots of variables, all of the other equipment compiling to the variables that could be causing you to miss the mix. In other words, not getting it right. Other claims that are made are that there are great inexpensive studio monitors that you can buy. And I do believe that this is true. The fact of the matter is that I don't have an unlimited budget to be able to test every inexpensive monitor on the market, which I'm sure all of us are in the same boat. So we're going to have to get a little bit of direction here so that we can make the best decision possible to be able to, again, not waste money, not waste time, and get out of being stuck. So again, this is true. You can buy inexpensive monitors, yet it doesn't solve the problem if you can't figure out if the studio monitors are telling the truth or not. And this is the crux of the issue. This is where the problem lies. If you're talking about association correlation when it comes to your problem, this is where it lies. If the monitor is not telling the truth, there's really no way you're going to be able to figure out what's going on. And sometimes what we can do is we can teach our ears to compensate for it not telling the truth. But it's very hard to get to know someone if they don't tell the truth. Have you experienced that with a human being? The same is true with a monitor. The same holds true here. You can then complicate this with engineering rooms with too many maybe reflective surfaces. You might have base nodes or even phase cancellations going on, accentuations going on in the room that are just going to make it even more difficult to figure out what's going on with your mix. Now, room treatment is important, but not a deal breaker when it comes to a monitor or what type of monitor to buy, okay? And we might do videos on the room treatment as well. We're not going to talk about it right now. So as I've said before, we all have to start somewhere when it comes to our gear purchases. And what I've learned is that I've walked the long road. I walked the long way home. I've learned the hard way that the monitor is not the place you want to skimp on money. You know, there's a lot of very expensive monitors out there, and you think, man, how could it be so expensive? And is it really that good? And, you know, will it really help? Well, I'm here to say that it does make a difference. Placement of the speakers is also very important too. That might be a part of our room treatment if we, move into a video on that. So does the studio monitor truly make a difference? Does the studio monitor make a difference? The answer is a resounding yes. Yes, it does. And now let's discuss my journey. In my early years, not understanding the importance of a studio monitor, I started with passive consumer bookshelf speakers and struggled the whole time. These speakers might have been from Best Buy, Circuit City. I mean, I think I went through lots of different kinds at the time, and was experimenting, trying different approaches, techniques, placements, all of these things. And it was maddening. In the early 90s, my next purchase was the PV monitor. They actually made a studio monitor that was one of the first monitors, to the best of my knowledge, that was amplified, bi-amped inside of the cabinet, okay, because that wasn't very common. And you had to have an amplifier, right, and speaker cable to be able to run the speakers. So, and I purchased those, and they did help. They did help the mix, but it still wasn't the answer. They sounded good with the program music, and the idea of them being powered was very intriguing to me. So there was a couple of other motivating parts to this to purchase the monitor. So again, program music sounded decent on it, right? And then the idea that they were powered, because we didn't see that very often. In fact, that was the first set of speakers that I saw that did that. So being enticed by the fallacy of looks and product presentation, I purchased the next set of monitors, which were a type of prototype KRK6 monitor. And that had the Kevlar cone. And I thought that I had arrived in the recording world. Along the way, I also picked up a set of passive Tannoy PB6s, or I think they're 6.5s, maybe is what they're called. And the speakers were much more detailed than the KRK monitors. I noticed that right away. They were actually, I think, a cheaper monitor than the KRK. Of course, they were passive, so you had to have an amplifier. And of course, what amplifier you hooked up to the KRKs made a huge difference too. And we can discuss that maybe in another video as well. So they just didn't have any low end though. The Tannoys, great separation, great detail, just not a lot of low end. So there was always an over mixing in that regard. I ended up getting a KRK sub that I used both with the KRK monitors and the Tannoys, and this seemed to help out. But what was interesting is that the Tannoys were not that good. My mixes were improving more and more. The KRKs, as cool as they looked, did not have the definition. Stereo imaging was not that good. They were lying to me, okay? They weren't telling me the truth about what was going on. They were making sound, but what I needed to hear wasn't there. So this means that you either have to figure out every imperfection of that monitor, figure it out so that you can compensate for it, or you're just going to be, again, running back and forth on tons of different sources to figure out whether it sounds right and whether your mix is translating or sounding right. So as we know as audio engineers, a monitor that over accentuates any frequencies causes us to mix those frequencies lighter, okay? Or even back off of those frequencies with EQ. That's what ends up happening. So if you're hearing too much of something and the monitor is generating that, okay, so it's really not in the audio signal, it's just something that the monitor's doing, what happens is you're going to compensate for that. The same is true is that if you have too much of something, so if you have too much, what will happen is you'll do the inverse. You'll mix back. If there's not enough, you'll mix too much. You'll add too much. So the question is, how much are the speakers lying to you? Are your monitors that you have even now, are they lying to you? What I noticed is that it varied from song to song with these speakers, and it kind of varied from style to style, and it was just maddening. And I just didn't have, I guess, enough ear power, neurons to process this continually to figure out what the heck they were doing all the time. And that's besides the room, okay? So along the way, there were improving purchases that made the studio much better before we finally took a look at monitoring for the studio, what I would say seriously, okay? In other words, that we're probably going to have to put down some paper to get a decent set of monitors, or more. We're going to have to pay or spend more money than what we've, at least spent individually in the past. So after long research and thanks to other individuals who shared their findings, we decided upon Focal studio monitors. Our first set were the Shape Twins. I did a video review of those. Those are fantastic monitors. We still own those monitors. We then upgraded to the Sub 6 subwoofer. We were kind of using the KRK at the time of that video, and then that changed. I bought into the marketing at the time when we got these, Focal Shape Twins. I bought into the marketing for the SonarWorks software and special microphone, and I thought we were doing good and realized that it wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. So we bought this hoping that it would fix the room and make the mixes better, where you don't necessarily have to focus on your imperfections or the imperfections of the monitor. You're sort of using the software essentially as a stopgap or a middleman to sort of conveniently make your life better. But there's always a trade-off with the convenience. And I even had a few friends come on over and kind of listen to what was going on. And I wanted to make sure that my assessments were accurate. And they basically said they heard the same thing. The SonarWorks did make the mixes more consistent, that's for sure. But my mixes were consistently uneven, lackluster, and flat. That's what was happening. There was also like distortion and like phasing issues, and the soundstage was not accurate. There was like multiple things going on here that it seemed that the software was doing, right? I know that the software was doing. Maybe things have changed since I had it. I don't know, but I am not going back to that. The Sub 6 subwoofer is one of the best subs I've ever heard. Not that I've heard every subwoofer on the planet, but this one is really, really good. It's great, in fact. The trick with any sub is the crossover frequency, I found, and many people make the mistake of crossing over too high. In our case here, the happy place seems to be 50 hertz. And if you just level that off just right, using because with the current monitors that we're using, even when we were using the Shape Twins, we were resting at about 50 hertz on the sub, and it worked really, really well. So all of these purchases and changes made a huge difference. And like I said, there was other things that we had purchased along the way before we finally got hip to, moving up in the studio monitor area. So all of these purchases and changes did make a huge difference because of the quality and the newfound consistency of the mixes that happened through the Focals, the Shape Twins. We decided to take the plunge with the Trio 11Bs teamed with the Sub 6 subwoofer. And it was at this point, heaven began to open up. Eureka, the awakening happened. It was at this point I finally realized how much of a difference studio monitors make. I finally found a studio monitor that didn't lie to me. That's incredible. Very liberating. And exciting. Because now, as cool as that was, all it did is it opened up all of this other work, because I began to realize how many mistakes I was making in even the setup of the studio. And so I found that if the studio didn't sound right, the mix or the recorded instruments, that they weren't sounding right either. And then all of a sudden, I'm realizing, okay, what now do we have to do to make this right again? What I've learned is that there is no free lunch with this stuff. Now's the time to get to work, because we had a monitor that told the truth. And that's exactly what we did. Here's what happened. We uninstalled SonarWorks because the new monitor showed how SonarWorks was messing with the sound. Okay. If you think about it, it kind of puts a lens between you and what you're actually hearing, the way that the SonarWorks, operates. There's myriads of artifacts with SonarWorks, distortion, timing issues, the smears on the soundstage. We kind of discussed that already a little bit. The next thing that happened, not to give away future video episodes here, because the Trio 11s exposed everything, I had to rewire all of the lines between my speakers, the interface, and the recording desk. And this literally changed everything. I began to question how everything was processed at this point. How much, how much effects do you put on, right? How much compression, if you're going to use any type of compression, do you use? Now, I was a firm believer before this, I was a firm believer in mixed bus processing. But here's what happened. The Trio 11s exposed what was happening to the music with the mix bus on, or with the mix bus processing. I had multiple things in the chain on the mix bus. And this literally convinced me to take everything off the mix bus. Everything. This improved the audio quality of my music by leaps and bounds. The music was alive again. I could hear the transients and the excitement in the music. There was actually space. There was actually air. You could hear the sound stage better. It was alive. It was moving. The music was breathing. It was dynamic. The Trios taught me that the mix bus on the recording desk, because we do use an analog recording desk, obviously behind me, had an adequate amount of natural compression. Okay, so there is no mix bus compression on this desk. It's just that when you begin to sum all of the channels into a mix bus, there is an element of natural compression that takes place that kept the music alive and giving the music space. This was a huge, huge breakthrough. And in fact, a relief. And what it did is it reminded me of the time when I was younger, before we had like all of this mix bus additive that seems to be perpetuated by everyone today. That's a different video now, though. But I have to bring that in because that was one of the major shifts of thinking that took place that we made here. Bruce Swedien was right when it comes to the mix bus processing. You don't need it. If you're doing things properly, if you're really listening to what's happening, you're not going to need it. And having a great studio monitor with solid amplification is going to help that. So as you can see, what's interesting is that you could use any type of speaker you want for your monitor, but you're going to pay for it somewhere. You're going to pay for it in remixing all the time. You're going to pay for it for the lack of translating on other types of listening devices. I mean, you might make 1,000 trips, back and forth trying to figure out what's going on and why it's not working properly. So my recommendation is to get the best studio monitor you can. And no matter if you're mixing in the box, if it's all digital, or if you're mixing analog. The other encouragement, and we're going to discuss this in other videos, also get industry standard, at least Mogami cabling. The stuff that I recommend is the 2549 or equivalent for all of your connections. If you can't afford it, because it can get expensive, the first thing you want to do is all of the critical monitoring lines need to be a high quality cable. I like Mogami. I've used it for years. It's like never let me down. So whether or not you want to use that or not, or you might find something that you like more. But I think for a reasonable price, you can get Mogami cabling. It's still not it's not cheap, but I believe bang for the buck, it's great. And in the process of doing that, that's one less variable that you have to worry about. Remember what I said earlier in the video? There's so many different variables that will get in the way. Make sure those critical connections have the best cable possible. So when looking at it, I guesstimated that I lost money over the years dealing with the monitors. I probably lost about $5,000 in the process. That's not including purchasing the Trio 11s. That was a whole other purchase, okay? Also, countless hours of remixing with tons of energy expelled and frustration, having to, deal with clients, deal with myself if I was doing music for myself, and really feeling quite ashamed of my mixes because nothing was translating properly. So I hope this video will save you time. I hope this video will save you energy and frustration, and of course, save you a few bucks along the way. Again, I'm Pete with Wingman Studios. Until next time.